Hello, this is Dr. Robert O. Welcome to Fall 2025 American Evangelical University, lecture number one. Can I start with prayer? Father, we thank you. We ask for your favor for this whole course. God, we would like to be a servant before student, focused on you, learning about you more than the topic, so they will become effective, Lord, servants of God. Enlarge our intellectual capacity that we may really understand the things that you have called us to do and be effective in the things, the calling that you have called us to. Thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let's start with 박수. In this class, um, same with every classes I've done, um, knowledge is important. And so my teaching would be based on facts and knowledge, but more than knowledge. So it's not anti-knowledge, it is for knowledge. And yet we would like to also focus on what is inspirational and empowerment. So at the end of my lecture, or I don't want people to say that, well, I learned a lot from him. Rather, yeah, it was great. There were a lot of information, but at the same time, man, I'm really inspired to follow Christ. And now I'm empowered to serve God better. So that's the kind of testimony I want to hear from you. I am actually recording this lecture from Cambodia, and this is my actually YouTube studio and my study. So, well, welcome to Cambodia. A little bit of myself, so that you know who I am. I was born in Korea, 1961. So as I teach this class, I'm 64 years old. I'm the last child of five children. My father was a medical doctor, but he wrote something against Dictator Park, 1970, early 70s. So we got kicked out of the country, 1973, to a place called America, LA, a home of 18 million people, my home since 1973. And at age 12, I immigrated to USA. Um, what happens when a Korean boy goes to America and lived there for 52 years? Well, he becomes Korean American. What does that mean? It means he is banana. He is banana. He is yellow outside, white inside. That's what banana is. If I lived in Korea all my life, I guess I'll be mango. I'll be yellow outside, yellow inside. It's an interesting book. If you're especially Asian ethnically, then I'm sure you're familiar with Professor Hua Young. He wrote a book called The Quest for Authentic Asian Christian Theology. It's very interesting. Matter of fact, Professor Hua Young came to our school at Oxford Center for Mission Study, and we had a very interesting discussion. And I told him, wow, I am banana. A little bit of my family. Uh, I have three grown children. First one, well, reached 40. Second one, 38. Last one, 35. And for some time, my daughter worked for Disney Channel, and she's a writer. And so we were able to go to Disneyland free of charge. So it was pretty fun because it is so expensive to go Disneyland. Oh, I live in Los Angeles, so the original Disneyland is in Anaheim, and it was only like 15-minute drive from my house. So we will go, and these days, to enter the Disneyland, one person per 1 day ticket is $250. So unbelievable. So, well, thank God my daughter worked for Disney Channel, so we were able to go in free. But anyways, just to celebrate. In terms of my educational background, I studied at UC Berkeley from 79 to 1984, studied philosophy, um, and got my bachelor there. It's a beautiful campus. Um, I just read the news. It's amazing how Berkeley ranked number 6 in the world. I said, woohoo! Number 1 was Harvard. I think it was Yale, MIT. I think fourth was Oxford, and then fifth was Cambridge, and sixth actually was UC Berkeley. I'm like, wow, how's it possible? Well, it's because it's all based on the international research that people are doing, and I guess Berkeley came up. So I'm so thankful that I went sixth. I guess, what do you call it? The best, sixth best university in the world. I went to Fuller, 1986 through 99, got my Master of Divinity. Um, I really enjoyed my time there. And then 1995 through 1998, I got my Doctor of Ministry. And then I went to Oxford Center for Mission Study. Now, Oxford Center for Mission Studies actually is at the city of Oxford, but is not part of the Oxford system. So it's so interesting. That's why I have to be very careful. Well, it is affiliated with London Middlesex University. So my PhD is from Middlesex, but campus is at Oxford. And wonderfully enough, it's so wonderful that we could access all the Oxford professors and all the Oxford libraries. So we would have Oxford professor do a lecture for us. And I mean, it was just so good. Now, unfortunately, and fortunately for me, because I started doing part-time and went back and forth, it took me a long time, 9 years almost. And last 2 years, I just went there and lived at Oxford for 2 years, and it was really interesting experience. My topic was on patron-client relationship of church planting in Cambodia. And once I finished, it became two publication through Regnum. And I don't think I share that. I think I may have brought the book here. So if you're interested in that topic, so after my PhD, the Regnum of England, um, working with the OCMS, Oxford, they published. So official title of the book became Kap Ben Ul, Korean Patron Client Dynamics in Church Planting in Cambodia. And I was very, very, very thankful. Dr. David Cranston actually condensed my 280 page or 260 page thesis into a thin volume. Um, and he does that for hobby. Dr. David Cranston is actually one who's in charge of uh, John Stott estate. So John Stott, Professor John Stott, who's the founder, who's the initiator of the OCMS, when he passed away as a single man, as bachelor, his estate, all his finance, someone had to take care. And Dr. David Cranston, he's well-known heart specialist doctor in England, became the, and then he's a board of trustee of our school. So, but his hobby, can you believe it? Hobby is to read someone's thesis and turn that into a thin volume. And I thought, oh, thank you, please do that. Well, now the ChatGPT can do that very, very easily. But 2000, I started 2009. What year did I start? 2009, and finished 2018. So 2018, ChatGPT wasn't introduced yet. I've been doing Cambodia Research and Resource Center in Cambodia for now 12 years. Um, we started this agency because so many Cambodian missionaries work and they just celebrate 100 year celebration, but not too much research in terms of uh, work that is done in Cambodia. And so we've been publishing a lot of books, doing a lot of fun research. I teach at CPTI, Cambodia Presbyterian Theological Institute, as a visiting scholar. Uh, I think they have 124 students right now, plus MDiv and THM. So probably I would say 150, 160 students. It used to be a lot more, but COVID took out a lot of people and anyways. So as a professor, I traveled through 8 countries. I taught at 27 universities, which is pretty interesting, and I thought that was really neat. I had privilege of lecture series. I wasn't an adjunct or full time because I didn't have time, but in terms of like 3-day lectureship at Princeton, Gordon Conwell, Fuller, did a special lecture there and things like that. So I thought that was really interesting. And Cambodia. Well, let's go to our core syllabus, and you have it in your website, or how do you call it? Your school link. Make sure you download and print, but I'm going to go through every section, the important parts. This is fall semester of 2025, fall. The course title is Existentialism and Christian Faith. This course explores the philosophical movement of existentialism and its significance for Christian faith. We will trace existential themes through the Western thought, Plato to Heidegger, engage foundational figures like Kierkegaard and Buber, and compare these ideas with Eastern philosophical tradition. Now, I am not specialist in Eastern tradition, which I regret. Living in 52 years in America, we used to consider Eastern thought as religion and only philosophy is Western. So I made the same mistake. But now lived in Cambodia, also have a center in Korea. I have Soren Kierkegaard Research Center in Korea, Sejong, for the last 3 years. I have a publishing house there. So we're engaged in a lot of these, more of the Eastern philosophical thought. So things changed, but so my teaching still be focused more on just Kierkegaard and Martin Buber, a little bit of Heidegger. Now, I know this words for some of the people who never took philosophy will be like, "Whoa, what is he talking about?" But it will be very focused on just few philosophers. I won't be going naming crazy number of philosophers, and I will not do that because I'm just trying to bring in existentialism in the context of Christian faith. Okay, so this course culminates in a theological synthesis of Christian existential thought, its relevance for ministry and spiritual formation. For those people whose English is not your primary language, your first language, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to use big words, and I have not written big words in my textbook or in my syllabus. But if you really have a hard time, I think if it's aired in YouTube, you could really read the text in your own language as well. So maybe try that. I think it's possible. So some of my philosophy students who's been taking my YouTube lectures, they said they could read what I say in English through Khmer or Cambodia language as a transcript. So try that. If let's say I had a lot of Japanese students before, and then try to listen to my thing and then do the transcription service in your own language. Hopefully they will help you. So my point that I'm making here is I, as a Christian existentialist, I would like to show you that what existentialism thought and philosophy and has in relevance to ministry, it is very relevant what you do. And and you will not come out of the textbook, you'll come out of my testimony after testimony after testimony. And that's where the inspiration and empowerment comes, not just head knowledge. Organizationally, this is a hybrid course comprising 8 lectures of 90 minutes each, totaling 12 hours. Now, so this lecture 1 is 90 minutes, but it's not going to be 90-minute long video. I'm going to give you a break in between, and then I'm going to have you write something. Think about it like maybe not in lecture 1, but lecture 2 and on, or I will say, stop, 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 pause the video, and then write down answer to this question or something like that. Also, make sure that you watch this video not in outside of this environment, because if you watch outside of this school environment, then I wouldn't know whether you watched it or not. But once you watch through our website, our, I think, Academic 365 or whatever that AEU assigns you to click in, make sure you click in and watch from this environment. Okay? So, and then, so not 8 lectures of 90 minutes plus 3 Zoom discussion meeting will be part of the course, fostering interactive learning and deeper understanding. Now, this will be my 4th or 5th AEU class. I would only have very small percentage of student attending Zoom meeting, and that kind of discourages me because I would like to talk to students and hear what they learn, and I know some of you are working and all that, but if at all possible, try to come into the Zoom meeting. And then before Zoom meeting, make sure you ask questions. Because Zoom meeting happens, I think, after 3, 4 weeks, right? So after listening to lecture 1 and 2, all the question you have, please put it on our wall. There's a chat room that you could respond, ask. Um, so that in the Zoom meeting that I don't have any special lecture or new lecture in Zoom. I'm only answering the question of the people that ask. I'm answering the question that people ask prior to the Zoom meeting. And then during our discussion during Zoom, if people have Q&A. So even Zoom meeting is supposed to be 90 minutes, but sometimes it could be an hour or 45 minutes. If no one shows up, or few people show up and no question, then that's good. But you're still required to watch Zoom meeting through a video. And then you're still required to write 2-page reflection paper anyway. So might as well be alive, right, in the live session. Because we're trying to promote, foster interactive learning and deeper understanding. Now, final paper is required at the end of the course. This course assumes previous theological and missiological training from your prior semesters, focusing on the specialized study of the philosophical movement of existentialism and its significance to Christian faith. Now, some of you are maybe first-year student, some of you are just bachelor program. It doesn't matter. I would like to include, I want you to not just talk about in your final paper about what you learned in this class, but what was your understanding of philosophy? What was your philosophy? Or were you anti-philosophy? And all those things would come in and interact with the teaching that I'll be doing. Well, what is the course learning objective? Very simple. To grasp Martin Buber's concept of self-contradiction as presented in I and Thou, and explore its philosophical, psychological, and theological dimension. Okay. Martin Buber's book that I wrote based out of I and Thou or Self-Contradiction 155. Self-Contradiction 155 means out of I and Thou book, there was one paragraph, only 155 words. And out of that, I wrote this book um, because I think it would be very important book. So grasp his concept and how it's going to incorporate into yourself personally and into your ministry. Um, what was it? Knowledge and inspiration. A. Oh, so that was A, grasp Martin Buber. B, to understand how this suppression of relational existence lead to spiritual disintegration and how this insight aligns with key biblical narratives. Okay. I guess it will become clear as you learn. C, to be inspired by relational worldview that Buber and Kierkegaard offer and reflect on its relevance for living a meaningful Christ-centered life. So that's knowledge and inspiration. Okay. Now, I only talk about Martin Buber, but actually the main text is also existentialism and Christian faith. I mean, this is what we're going to learn almost page by page, and this will become another required reading. So just be aware that textbooks will be used. Then what are the skills that you'll be learning? To analyze, number one, to analyze and articulate complex philosophical text, particularly Buber's and Kierkegaard's works, in accessible theological language. Wow, that's a huge challenge. Because if you ever read philosophy books, it's like, Mamma mia, it's like, what the heck are they talking about, right? Well, I'm trying to bring that to a simple term, simple concept, so that you and I understand when I talk about Martin Heidegger's Dasein, you go, oh yeah, I understand that. You know, talk about the thrownness, talk about teleological suspension of the ethical, and then you know, cogito ergo sum, right? Coram Deo, all this stuff, right? Mundus discipi, all that kind of stuff. You just like you click. I understand, and that's the goal, right? Particularly Martin Buber's I and Thou. Second, to identify signs of self-contradiction both in self and in others, and apply biblical philosophical tools for discernment and spiritual growth. This is so critical because the whole self-contradiction, I mean, I'm just right now working on subject of suicide. And I'm now working with a Korean rapper named BY, um, writing books for Korean crowd. Why does Korean young people rank number one in suicide in OECD country? And we're saying we're the seventh or sixth largest economic power in the world, or young people are killing themselves, right? Number one. Korea is number one suicide rate of the old people. So young and old, they all kill themselves. Why? Well, because this whole self-contradiction, and that's what we're going to learn about, both in self and in others. Apply biblical and philosophical tools for discernment and spiritual growth. C, to critically examine false relational constructs, including religious forms, and distinguish them from genuine I and thou encounters. So that's the part of the skill. Remember I said I'm more focusing on empowerment? Well, this is the empowerment. A, to move from existential disorientation toward authentic, relational, living rooted in Christian faith. What it means to be Christian. You know, people say that, oh, if you want to be true Christian, you cannot study philosophy. And that is nonsense. You know, the greatest philosopher who ever lived was Jesus Christ, right? And so I think that it's kind of oxymoron to argue that you cannot study philosophy if you're a Christian. And it will become very clear as we learn this class. B, to cultivate deeper relational integrity in pastoral ministry, counseling, and community life. Wow, once you really get Martin Buber's self-contradiction well and digest it and incorporate and you actualize in your life, your counseling skill make a quantum leap. You begin to understand, you begin to not judge, and you're not going to try to change them or correct them or transform them because we're not transformer, right? Jesus is. And so it's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be all played out in my lecture. C, to empower others, whether students, congregants, or family members, to break free from inner duplicity and embrace life-giving relationship guided by truth, faith, and God's presence. Can you say amen to that? So as I said, the required reading is that book right there. And I made it available through AEU website, PDF download. So it's free. You download. But if you actually want to buy in paperback or actually in Kindle, then go to Amazon Prime or just go to Amazon, amazon.com. And then you have my books in ebook. So all over the world, you could download my book, Existentialism and Christian Faith, Robert Rowe. You type that, it'll pop, right? And then you just purchase. And then it'll be in your electronic book file. Try to do that. Well, actually, yeah, anyways, never mind. So, two, second book is Self-Contradiction. It's also PDF download. And also you could purchase uh, in the Amazon. Another required reading, because it would be more like learning about Soren Kierkegaard's uh, theology by reading 30 of his prayer. This is a really interesting devotional. And then I really want you to download. Print, please print. Don't keep it in the soft file only. Print it. And then do this for 30-day meditation. It will really change your life. Kierkegaard's philosophy, if you really read it, meditate it, and understand it and appreciate it. So this is my first recommended book. Uh, so far, everything's been written by me. And because I make my books available free of charge, I make my book required. Otherwise, interesting how my wife is studying her doctoral ministry at Fuller right now. And one class requirement was something like 3,000 pages. And I'm the one who bought all the books that she had to read. And I think it came to be like almost $300. It's just so expensive. But I'm making free of charge to you guys. So anyways, but if you do you know, QR code, then you take you to ebook Kindle version. Um, I wonder if it still works. Let me see. So you could buy an ebook. So let me just make sure that. Oh yeah. So when you do the QR code, it's gonna take you to Amazon Kindle book format. So that you could just download and it's nice to have a ebook, electronic book library. Uh, Same thing. Another recommended. This actually is I and Thou, Journey with Martin Buber and the Bible. Um, and there are a few other books I wrote that you could look up in Amazon, but so far that's the only recommended books. So required books, of course, you have to read all three, right? So you have to read this one thoroughly. And this is the book that I'll be basing my lecture 1 through 8. And then I'll be referring to some other books. This will be the stuff that also we have to learn, but in the context of existentialism. And this is a book I really want you to read, almost like a devotional, more than, and then you'll begin to understand what Kierkegaard is talking about and how does it apply in your life. Okay, well, grading is important, isn't it? So attendance and class participation, 8 weeks, will be 20%, right? And then every lecture, right, that you have and the Zoom meeting, I expect 1.5 page reflection paper, okay? It's font size 12, double space. So it's not a lot. Very simple. I just want to know if you read it, if you did it, listen to my lecture. You could even just do a summary of what you learned. But I mean, I'm gonna later talk about it. I want you to start writing your final paper from lecture number one. Everything you write should all be compiled and become your final paper. Okay? So first one was 20% attendance, participation, and then the 2 page, 1.5 page reflection. Just make it to 30%. And then the final paper, 12 page, uh, 10 page, and you could write up to 15 if you need to, but I think 12 page would be much better. 10 page is kind of short for you to express everything, but minimum 10. So that would be 50%. So normally, what determines your grade is your final. So if you just attend, you put everything up, then I pretty much give, if you attended and anything that you write, as long as it makes sense, it doesn't have to be fancy, just whatever, then I always get A. So attendance A, um, the reflection paper A. So you actually start with A. Now, let's say your 50% grade, um, you get B. Then, of course, A mashed with B becomes A minus. Or if it's lower B, then so make sure that you accumulate all your reflection paper and turn that into your final paper. Wow, are we jumping into? Oh, I guess we're jumping into the book already. Page 9. Let me see. I want to make sure sometimes page number I kind of miss. Yes, it is. And also, this book, if you download, you realize the first part is in English and the second part is in Korean. So it's bilingual book. The reason is because AEU, I teach both Korean and English speaking students. So I used to have two separate, but I said, why? Because Amazon, I publish all my books through Amazon or Kindle. They would not allow Korean language to be published. So I couldn't. Until I realized if the half of them is English and you are translating the same English book to Korean, then they allow it. So it's just really interesting. So I thought, fantastic. So I wrote in English first and translate and then publish it together. So if you're a Korean student, well, you could listen to my lecture in English and you could flip through Korean section. Well, page 9 of this book, this is paraphrase of Soren Kierkegaard's. He said, I dare you to ask the hardest question. Who am I? Why am I anxious? Does my life matter? And give points, and then point us to the one who gives those questions their answer. Mm. So Soren Kierkegaard, um, in my lecture, I'm not going to teach you on and on and on and on about who is Soren Kierkegaard. Maybe that was the style of teaching maybe 30 years ago, or 50 years ago when there was no computer, or when there was no, especially now, ChatGPT and all these research tools. I don't want that information to be passed out at this precious 90 minute that I have with you. Matter of fact, it will be sort of like I want you to spend your next project will be I want you to find out everything about Soren Kierkegaard and write me 5-page report or 3-page report on Soren Kierkegaard. See, that can actually become your part of your final paper too. So it's always building a library of philosophers, writers, theologians, and then keep a file, right? So who is Soren Kierkegaard? Well, it's Danish philosopher. He's the father of existentialism. And he is an amazing thinker who died about 160 years ago. But his writing, his life transformed my life, changed my life. That's how he should look like. And some of you are, if you ever type Soren Kierkegaard in the web, it gives you different. That image is what I created using ChatGPT. And I gave all the right information, and I believe he was that handsome. Well, I guess now the lecture one now actually begins. Introduction to Existentialism and Christian Faith. What are these key existential questions? There are 4. Authentic self, identity, right? Freedom, which means decision. Decision is so important. Choice. If there's no freedom, choice and decision means nothing. So Kierkegaard really, really focused on that. Anxiety, right? They said, oh, despair or anxiety, sickness unto death, right? The concept of anxiety. Oh, and we turn anxiety into disease. That's the problem. We turn despair into disease. And that's the problem. See, despair is the starting point of salvation, according to Kierkegaard. So, yeah, and also meaning. So there are four things that we're going to talk about. Introduction to existentialism and Christian faith. What is existentialism? It talks about freedom and responsibility. Existentialism begins with the understanding that we are abruptly cast into a world without a user manual, yet we bear the weighty task of choosing moment by moment who we will become. For Soren Kierkegaard, this decision is akin to standing on the edge of a cliff, fully aware that the leap is ours and ours alone. No doctrine or system can make the choice for us. It is our responsibility to step forward, trusting that God will meet us in the fall. Wow, that's pretty. Mm. So, in other words, simply called jump, right? Jump. I produce a monthly testimony book called Living Like Kierkegaard. Living Like Kierkegaard, this is May 2025. So there's one like June 2025, July 2025. Every month I produce a testimony book uh, on all the project that I've done that month and books I published, place I traveled, people I met, and theological concept and all these political thought, whatever that comes to my mind, I write, and I publish. Well, this, and I've been doing that for many years, well, decade. It started out doing once a year testimony book, but now it has become monthly. And each book has a section, introduction section, which I'm going to read to you. I want to live like Soren Kierkegaard. I met too many people wanting to talk about existential philosophy, but refusing to live as an existentialist. Most likely, Soren Kierkegaard would not want to be identified as existentialist, but he did start a philosophical movement called existentialism. This is interesting. If you go to heaven and meet Kierkegaard and said, "Wow, dude, aren't you Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard? Aren't you the father of existentialism?" He said, "No, I did not start anything." But unfortunately, he did. Maybe we can just try to copy and try to live like Soren Kierkegaard as just a Kierkegaardian. So my point is this: when we talk about theology or philosophy, too many people only interpret as informational and said, "I know a lot about theology." Why don't you live it? "I know a lot about Kierkegaard philosophy." Why don't you live it? See, to be a true existentialist, you cannot just talk about what existentialism is and talk about in the context of knowledge. You have to show, right, as an Kierkegaardian. So let me continue reading. I composed a poem pearling Soren Kierkegaard's thought in one place. What I did this month can be represented by so many of the points from this poem becoming that individual. Okay. I already told you that identity, the freedom, anxiety, and the meaning are the core tenets of existentialism. And I'm going to read you the poem that I composed. I have not really written it because I put together all the Soren Kierkegaard's philosophical thought as a poetry. It is quite long, so please be patient, but it's got to be done. Title: Jump, Becoming the Individual. Who is a poet? He is an unhappy man who conceals profound anguish in his heart, yet whose lips are so formed that as he sighs and cries pass over them, they sound like a beautiful music. Love does not alter the beloved, he says. It alters you. Love is all, it gives all, and it takes all. So don't forget to love yourself. Don't become indifferent. Don't become a stranger. At the bottom of enmity between strangers lies indifference. Be free. Be that self which one truly is. You will lose control. Do not fear anxiety. Anxiety is a dizziness of freedom. During the first period of man's life, the greatest danger is not to take risk, not to be anxious, not to be free. You are free indeed, yet how absurd you are. You never use the liberties you have, and you demand those you do not have. You have freedom of thought, but you demand freedom of speech, freedom from finance, freedom from social injustice. Because you who, as a physical being, always turn toward outside, thinking that your happiness lies outside, you finally turn inward and discover that source is within you. Face the fact of being you are inside, for that is what will change who you are outside. Jump. Have faith in God. If I'm capable of grasping God objectively, I do not believe. But precisely because I cannot do this, I must believe. I must jump. The paradox is really the pathos of intellectual life. And just as only great souls are exposed to passion, it is only the greatest thinker who is exposed to what I call paradoxes, which are nothing else than grandiose thought in embryos. It is in this imperfection of everything you can attain your desire by passing through the opposites. Take away paradox from the thinker and you have professor. So jump, have faith in yourself, become that self which one truly is. It is so hard to believe because it is hard to obey. Faith is the highest passion you will ever experience. Faith is a snare. You cannot have it without being caught. You cannot have faith in such a way that you catch it, but only in such a way that it catches you. So jump and live your life to the fullest. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. Life's hidden forces can only be discovered by living the highest and most beautiful thing in life, and not be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but to be lived. Purity of heart is to will one thing, to be that individual, desire it, think it, meditate it. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thought. You are ripe when you have made truth your own. Also, be careful about what you dream. Old age realized the dreams of youth. Look at Dean Swift. In his youth, he built an asylum for the insane. In his old age, he was himself an inmate. Jump and pray your life to the fullest. Pray like you have absolutely nothing to do. Why are you so busy? Who are you busy for? You pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that you hurry past it. It seems essential in all tests that you concentrate only what is most significant and important. Far from idleness being the root of an evil, it is rather the only true good. Pray like you are in love. Just as in earthly life, lovers long for the moment when they are able to breathe forth their love for each other. So let their souls blend in soft whisper, so long for the moment when in prayer you can, as it were, breathe forth your love to God. Prayer does not change God, but it changes you who pray. It is God who will fashion you. God creates out of nothing. Wonderful, you say. Yes, to be sure. But he does what is still more wonderful. He makes saints out of sinners. If you do not jump, you will be bored. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. I begin with the principle that all men are bores. Surely no one will prove himself so great a bore as to contradict me in this. Sincere boredom advances, and boredom is the root of all evil. No wonder then that the world goes backward and evil spreads. This can be traced back to the very beginning of the world. The gods were bored, therefore they created human beings. God created them to jump, the only way out from this boredom. How do you become that individual? Do not let the world give you a name. If that is not you, once they label you, they will negate you. Don't be afraid to become that individual. There is nothing which every man is so afraid as getting to know how enormously much he is capable of doing and becoming that individual. Don't expect world to understand you. The world understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. Don't fight with the world. Quarrel with the world is completely fruitless, whereas the quarrel with oneself is occasionally fruitful and always, I have admit, interesting. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. So I dare you to become that individual. Jump. Wow. Whew. That was a very long poetry, but it talks about, in that poetry, it talks about, as I said, your identity, your freedom, your anxiety, meaning. So, what is existentialism? What is angst? We talked about anxiety. This radical freedom brings with more than the ordinary fear of danger. It unleashes existential anxiety or angst. When we face the abyss of infinite possibility, we feel vertigo of freedom. So Kierkegaard or existentialist or I um, understand the angst, anxiety, not as something so negative. I have to, so someone has to work so hard to get rid of anxiety in someone's life. No, it's something that you need to embrace, you need to live with. You need to say basically, well, I'm going to accept and I'm going to move on instead of make that as an issue, you know. Because out of anxiety, the dizziness of freedom, that you have this thing called choice. Choice is both triumphant and failure lie, both triumph and failure lie within our hands. Kierkegaard calls this the dizziness of freedom. Choice is dizziness of freedom. If we don't have freedom, right, then we don't have choice. If God created you as a robot, then robot doesn't choose. So the whole anxiety comes because we are not created as robot. The robot does not have anxiety. Why? Because they don't have freedom. But the reason that we are anxious because we have freedom to choose. So trembling that precedes the leap of faith. A trembling, so dizziness of freedom, that is a trembling that precedes the leap of faith. You need to make a leap of faith. You need to choose, right? In the moment of trembling, we confront our creaturely dependence and our God-given capacity to decide. So how is it reflected in my life? So let me not talk as in theory, but let me talk about that is in, well, how do I make a choice? How do I make a choice of life? How do I move on? How do I raise my children, for example? I raise them, I feed them, I educate them, but I tell them, choice is yours. It's your life. And um, and I'm going to honor the choice you make. So most Korean parents, they grill them, they tell them to go to college and get certain grade and be a certain profession. When my children turned 16, I collected all the money that I've been saving for them, and I would not, relatives come and they get all this, and I'll just collect it until they're 16 and open up their bank account, maybe $3,000. And then I give them a credit card out of the bank and buy them a car. I said, well, have a wonderful life. I'll feed you. I'll house you. You could go to college if you want to. If you don't want to college, that's fine. If you want to, and then they study hard. They went to the college they want, and they became a professional that choose to be. I believe, um, because I am an existentialist, that I believe that, yeah, as an individual, you need to have, out of the anxiety of the real life issue, that you choose, a freedom to choose and become that individual whom God has made you to be. Okay. So I'm not just talking theory here. I'm talking about choice is important, freedom is important, and you need to decide. You need to decide your life, not someone else. And then you become authentic, right? Meaning and authenticity. Closely tied to freedom and anxiety is our deep longing to live lives of genuine significance. Existential thinkers challenge us to reject crowd-sourced values. What is crowd-sourced values? Whatever that Facebook, Instagram said, well, this is a car you need to drive, this is a hairstyle you need to, this is the pants you need to wear, this is the shoes you need to wear, on, and marketing the product, and we just become consumer. The unexamined norms inherited from society and instead seek or even create purpose true to our own being. Martin Buber's I, it versus I and thou distinction sheds the light on this quest. Authenticity emerges when we relate to others and to God as subject, not as object. Only in such reciprocal encounter do our lives acquire depth and meaning. Wow. So you have this freedom, you out of the anxiety, you need to make a choice and you decided, right? But that is not going to be based on, oh, what my mom said, or my friend said, or the media said, and the world said, you know. And a lot of times people buy stuff that they don't even like to please people whom he doesn't even like with money that they don't have. And this constant cycle of vicious cycle of false self, not the authentic self, false self, right? Controlling your life. Wow. Because your primary relationship with God has become I and it. He becomes someone to bless you, make you happy. It's not I and thou, personal relationship. So, what is choice and commitment? At the heart of existential thought is the conviction that our choices define us. Kierkegaard's notion of the either or underscores the impossibility of neutrality. You have to choose. You know, it said, no, I just gonna just live neutral and day before I die, I'm gonna choose God. You cannot do that. Either you choose God or hell, right? Very simple. We either embrace faith or succumb to despair. Buber adds that genuine encounter carries an irrevocable commitment. True dialogue established a covenant bond. When we choose an I and thou relationship, we are bound by responsibility, grace, forever changed by commitment we make. When we grasp these themes, we see how existentialism described the very question Jesus' parables and teaching assume. Who will I follow? What is the cost of discipleship? Can I face suffering without losing hope? Wow. So what's the modern day problem? We're now, you will be ministering. I don't know who you are, what old you are, and if you're um, old enough to be at AEU, you'll be most likely be ministering to Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha will be a scary generation. They are what we call digital natives. They never went through analog world. Their concept of reality is so digitized. Generation Alpha, it will be struggle. It's not even gonna be homosexuality or same gender issue. It's gonna be, I want to marry a robot or a humanized AI. I mean, will become an authentic issue, and you need to deal with that. So, what is self? What is authenticity? What is being real? Right? Uh, so huge. Um, so when the simple people say that, oh, you don't need philosophy, just love Jesus and follow him. Yeah, I love Jesus and I follow him. Well, what does that mean in today's context? Um, Identity. So that was introduction. Page 11, the significance of the theological spiritual context. Go to your page 11. So far, I cover section one, defining existentialism themes of freedom, anxiety, meaning, and choice and authenticity. It's part two, page 11. Significance of oh, it's in front of me. Okay. The significance of existentialism in theological and spiritual context. Why should Christians study thinkers who sometimes seem intent on pushing God off the stage? Two reasons. So you could tell that I'm using my book almost page by page because for first time reader, I don't think you could really understand, right? Because it's pretty loaded text. So should we take a break? Yeah, so anytime, I mean, this is a video. So anytime you could pause You think and write. So what does that mean? Or wow, so don't just listen, pause the video, write down um, a paragraph or so. Try to summarize, try to contextualize. Oh, that's what you could just circle the section and write. But in my ministry, in my country, in Japan, or in Cameroon, or in Turkey, because I had students from 10 countries last time. So yeah, but what does it really make sense? I mean, if you live in Europe, you understand Kierkegaard a little more than Africa or Thailand, because it's maybe first time you heard the word existentialism or Kierkegaard, but I understand. So why would we study as a Christian? There are two reasons. Number one, diagnosis before prescription. You know what diagnosis is like? Finding out how you're sick before prescription, what medicine to take. So just as doctors must first identify an illness before prescribing the proper medicine, Christian ministry flourishes when we accurately name the spiritual malices we face. In The Sickness Unto Death, Soren Kierkegaard describes despair as sickness of self that emerges when we refuse to acknowledge our dependence on God. Well, think about that. Let me repeat that again. In Sickness Unto Death is a book. Kierkegaard describes despair as a sickness of the self that emerges when we refuse to acknowledge our dependence on God. That's what despair is. So, despair is the beginning of salvation. Why? Because we try to get away from God. Martin Buber demonstrates how I-it relating, in which we treat others as even God as object, dehumanize both speaker and listeners. Only by confronting this diagnosis can we turn to scripture remedies, honest lament like Jacob wrestled with God, and mediated presence like the early church table fellowship where real healing begins. Hmm. Why should Christians study thinkers who sometimes seem intent on pushing God off the stage? You could, like Nietzsche or Sartre or Martin Heidegger, and basically they don't believe in God. But why do we need to study them? Well, because we need to diagnose. Well, how sick are we? What kind of sickness is it? Right? Um, Number two, engaging in postmodern hunger. Many of our neighbors dismiss received theology as irrelevant tradition, yet they ache for authenticity and genuine community. What is received theology? It's revelation theology. People say that, oh, I am scientific, I am science, I believe in science. I don't believe in this faith nonsense. I don't believe that God will speak to you and receive theology that God has given you and God this, God that. And they said, oh, right? It's irrelevant. Yet there's that incredible hunger, ache for authenticity and genuine community. Existentialism equips us with language to address this deep longing, not by diluting the gospel, but by revealing how Christian faith speaks directly into the heart of modern angst. Remember, I told you that anxiety, you know, why is they said that after COVID-19, almost twice as many people is gonna die killing themselves because of depression and the anxiety that COVID-19 brought. Wow. And so don't turn anxiety into something negative you cannot fight back. Anxiety is necessary. It's the dizziness of freedom. because God wants you to make choice. God wants you to take a jump. God wants you to follow him. We proclaim freedom without emptiness, echoing Jesus' promise. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Hallelujah. Right? I know the truth, and truth will set me free. So in my freedom, there is anxiety, like, because I need to choose. I need to decide. I'm not a robot. So we cultivate hope beyond despair through a resurrection imagination that treats every closed door as hinged rather than a wall. Wow. Every wall, a door, they said. And we root meaning in covenant, reminding people that God's promise to Abraham, to Israel, and to church remain our unshakable anchor. Okay, so why do we need to study thinkers, right, who tends to say that? So, like, for example, Nietzsche's thought influenced a lady named Hangang in Korea. And last year, October 2024, October, she received Nobel Prize. And she was heavily influenced by Nietzsche. She never come out and say that, but this is my analysis of reading her books. She published 13 books in her lifetime. Out of 7 books, she won Nobel Prize, and one of them was poetry book, and Boys Coming, and um, White, and Never Say Goodbye. And so I read about 10 books and actually start publishing about Hangang and how if she in fact was influenced by Soren Kierkegaard, how come we're so different, right? And because it's talking about the postmodern hunger, emptiness. By weaving together Kierkegaard's insistence on passionate subjectivity and Buber's call to dialogical presence into our sermons, counseling sessions, teaching, we move beyond mere ideas. You know why people are sick and tired and they don't want to come to church? Because they just talk about loving our neighbors when our neighbors are not doing. We say that, oh, God will welcome the strangers, and yet their own town said, we don't want refugees to, because we're going to be poor, and all that kind of nonsense. So they always only believe in theory. They don't live out their faith. They rather spend money to go and they say, well, we're going to go Muslim country and try to evangelize when the Muslim wants to come to your country as refugees. And no, we don't want it. That kind of nonsense, right? It's not an idea. We invite people into encounter with the living God, encounters that transforms despair into hope and isolation into community. So what is this passionate subjectivity? Kierkegaard is the one who, well, later we're going to talk about, but I'm just going to foreshadow. I can't wait. Is the one who said, Coram Deo, or you stand before God alone. That's what it means. When Denmark king declared that we are now all Lutheran, and as Luther said, sola fide, by faith only, we're now Christian. And he was only 23-year old. He said, then challenged the church, and that then we're all going to die and go to hell. Because he said, God did not save a nation. God did not save a city. God did not save a family. God only can save that one individual. So I'm in not right now a second supervisor for a PhD student at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. His whole concept is Kierkegaard's paper on what is church. And Kierkegaard says church is within you. So you are church, right? Not this visible church. But when he says, oh, the invisible church, oh, the universal church, Catholic, no, it's not talking about invisible church is not the concept of church. Invisible church is the inner church or inner self church. Okay. Wow. Well, we'll be all night talking about that. So comparing Western and Eastern approach to existential question. Well, this is more of a testimony. Um, when I first arrived at Fuller Theological Seminary, 1984, wow, that was 41 years ago. That's crazy. 41 years ago, I insist that we explore what I call yellow theology, a theological vision rooted in Asian culture, context, and lived experience. My professors, almost uniformly trained in European thought, met this request with puzzled silence. In an institution where theology and philosophy were assumed to be inherently Eurocentric, the very notion of Asian or polycentric approach seemed foreign. I argue passionately that if we are to develop a truly polycentric theology, one that honors diverse voices and contexts, we must begin with self theology, a disciplined reflection of our own histories, cultures, and spiritual longings. Only by grounding ourselves in our unique identity can we then engage in genuine dialogue with the Western tradition that have dominated the academy for so long. Wow. And I did that 41 years ago. I was I was 25 or something. I was like, and then I went to Fuller and I said, hey, I don't want to learn Karl Barth or Paul Tillich or, that's just white people talking white theology. Give me yellow theology. And they said, what the heck is that? We don't know what that is. And I said, I don't know what it is, but give it to me. So now we talk about polycentrism, self-theology as something hip and, modern. But no, it started 41 years ago in my life. And my struggle uh, with Eurocentric thought, they think we are the truth. When Western and Eastern tradition have each grappled with core question of human existence, often arriving at strikingly parallel insight. In 19th and 20th century Europe, Soren Kierkegaard confronted existential anxiety, the dread of freedom itself, and invited leap of faith as the cure. Across Asia, Buddhist teaching on impermanence and non-attainment address the same struggle. Our suffering arises when we cling to what inevitably changes, and liberation comes through letting go. Do you agree? Did you know that the largest Kierkegaard Research Center with 20,000 volumes of books is in St. Olaf University in Minnesota, USA? But of course, Kierkegaard is a Danish philosopher. There's only 6 million Danish still, very small country. And when you go Copenhagen, there is Soren Kierkegaard Research Center in the heart of Copenhagen University. It wasn't part of university. Actually, Copenhagen University Philosophy and Theology Department collapsed. So they invited Soren Kierkegaard Research Center outside of university in, and I went to both. I went to outside library and then within. And it was right now, the Buddhist monk and Chinese monks or Chinese, they just crowd the library and research center because they realize that fact, right? That's really interesting. Jean-Paul Sartre, Declaration of Radical Freedom, existence precedes essence, challenged Western thinkers to embrace the fact that we continually create ourselves through our choices. So what does that mean? Existence precedes essence. Well, essence is like, I'm beautiful, I'm rich. The essence is that, the whole thinking is that I think. The thinker is not existence, but its essence. But so cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, what Descartes said, what Kierkegaard is teaching and Jean Sartre, using Kierkegaard's teaching, and he just coined this term, existence precedes essence. And that's why the Western world just flipped. It's like, what is this? Well, the Eastern thought always talked about it. So that, you could have a great thinker, and then there's come someone who just changed the whole game, and it was Soren Kierkegaard. Taoism, by contrast, speak of aligning the way, not redefining reality, but flowing into harmony with rhythms of life. Both perspectives call for recognize and inhabit our freedom, whether through active self-creation or receptive attunement. So, as I told you already, in terms of Eastern thought, I'm just read it and you kind of process it, and maybe if you're from East and you really study this in depth, please write a paper on that and try to teach me because I really need to learn. So please, if you've learned studied Taoism for a long time, and if you're Buddhist for a long time, and then you become Christian, great. Please write me a paper on Buddhism in the context of how you interpret now then Kierkegaard existentialism. Okay. In the West, we call to authenticity meant rejecting crowdsourced values, the unexamined norm that smother individuality. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to. Okay, in China, Confucianism emphasized duty and shaping power of ritual. Virtue is cultivated through repeated practice in community rather than opposing one another. These approaches show different path to moral integrity, one stressing inward sincerity, the other communal formation. Okay, so you could kind of see it in this way. The Western, Kierkegaard's anxiety and leap, Sartre's radical freedom, authenticity against the crowd, creating meaning through choice. In terms of Zen, it will be suchness or awakening to that what already is. You're not creating, you're just awakened or realized. Well, I think we come to our lecture one conclusion, introduction to existentialism and Christian faith. Please write one and a half reflection paper. Write everything that you knew about existentialism before the class, right? Or one or key um, points you learned from the book and write how you can apply them in your own ministry. Please post all your questions on AEU walls so that I could answer during the Zoom meeting. Okay, so reflection paper, when you write it, there's a section that you could post. Don't wait. I mean, whatever that comes to your mind. And actually, my next lecture, I don't know if I compose it this way. I'm going to check again. And if I didn't, I'm going to do a special lecture on how to use AI to write. I really encourage you to use ChatGPT to write, not the content, but write. I want you to provide the content and have ChatGPT write for you. Because if English is not your language, I don't want you to sweat over your grammar, spelling. Why? I don't want you to, I'm more interested in what you're thinking and what you're learning, not whether you could write English or not, right? So let ChatGPT write for you, but write your content, right? Your thought, okay? And I'll do a lecture on that. So, okay, Lord bless you. I pray that lecture one was meaningful. It is quite a lot. Um, so if you have problem, just pause it and write notes, um, and then ask question, and then always ask, what does that mean for me? How is it going to change me? How is it going to challenge me? How am I going to change because of this? And why is my ministry, my mission work affected by this teaching? Okay. Lord bless you. See you tomorrow. Oh, not tomorrow. See you next lecture.